One of the most common emails that I get from students is people ask me, Adam, what's the best way to learn more words in English? What's the most efficient way to do it? And I get why they're asking me that. It's because there are so many exceptions in English that it's ridiculous. Like there's words that will end with a Y, and then there's other ones that'll end with an E, and then there's some that'll even end with an I. Like, you'll have like economy, apostrophe, and literati. And all of those letters make the same sound, E. And on top of that, we have some words where we don't even pronounce a certain letter inside of it, like the K in knife. And because of that, the way that a lot of people that teach English will handle this problem is they'll tell their students, yeah, it's kind of an exception. You're just going to have to memorize it that way. But here's the thing. I don't believe that at all. I think that's absolutely not true. In fact, there's always a reason for why a word is spelled or shaped a certain way. To show you what I mean, let's take a look at these two words. Astronomy and astrology. They look really similar. But let's break both of them in half. We have astro and nami and astro and logi. Right out of the gate, we can see that both of these words share the same beginning, astro. Now, astro comes from Greek. It means star. So we know both of these words have to do with stars. Now let's look at nami at the end of astronomy. Now nami comes from the Greek word nomos, and it's talking about looking at a system that's regulated, and you're observing the interactions that happen between all the different parts that are making up that system. So what would that have to do with stars? Well, stars are part of solar systems, and you're looking at how those solar systems are regulated and the movements of planets. And you can even look at the movements of like solar systems inside of galaxies. Now, moving on to astrology, we have astro, okay, so it has to do with stars, obviously. And then we have logi. Now, logi comes from the Greek word logos, which means a message. What's a message? It's just information that we get from something. So it's just studying something for information. So whenever you see logi at the end of a word, it probably means the study of that thing. But it's important to remember the message part. So astrology is when you look at the stars and you're studying them to gain a message. So the difference between astronomy and astrology is when a scientist looks through a telescope at the night sky, and astrology is when somebody looks at the newspaper to find out whether or not they're going to fall in love next week. Now what's cool about this is after understanding what all these little parts mean, you can apply your knowledge of these little tiny parts of the word in other situations, like in the word economy, we see nami at the end of the word. We know that it's talking about a system that's regulated and has a bunch of interactions happening between the different parts that make up that system. Well, an economy is a giant system that's built up of companies and customers, and it's regulated, and we're watching the interactions between those different parts. So just by understanding nami, you now understand half of a bunch of words that you haven't even seen before. And you can apply that every time you see that ending. And the more of those pieces you know, the easier it becomes to memorize words. It'll get to the point where you'll recognize, oh, I know that part, I know this part, and I know this part of a word, and you'll instantly know what it means. Now you might be thinking, oh, crap, so you're saying I have to memorize 3 things instead of 1 when I learn words? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you're never going to have to memorize again, because there's a difference between memorizing things and learning things. Memorizing is when you beat information into your head that you don't fully understand. Learning something means you understand something so well that you're able to apply it in other situations. So the more you understand how these parts work together, the less you have to memorize. Now, understanding the parts of a word is very useful. But another thing that helps a ton is understanding how those words have changed over time. If we look at how a word changed over time, we can understand why it's spelled a certain way. For example, let's look at the word knife. It starts with a K. Well, this word comes from Old Norse. The Vikings, when they came in and invaded the British Isles, they had weapons that they called knifer. They were knives, essentially. And when the word reached Old English, it turned into knif. And over hundreds of years, people stopped saying that K sound, and they just said knief. And eventually, knief turned into knife. But people kept writing the K there because they'd always written it. So that's why there's a K in knife. So what I'm saying is by understanding what the pieces of a word means, and on top of that, understanding how a word has evolved over time, you no longer will have to memorize a word without understanding why it means what it means. Which means you'll always understand the logic and patterns behind English, which means there's no more exceptions, and that will supercharge your ability to learn new words in English. Now you might be wondering, where do I go to learn these concepts? Well, it just so happens I'm launching a course that focuses on these very things. In this course, I'm going to be going over 30 of the most commonly used root words in the English language. And I'm not just going to tell you what they mean. I'm going to show you how they've changed over time. So that way you'll understand why they look the way they do today. It'll help you with spelling, and it's going to make you a lot more effective when it comes to learning new words in English. I'll also be showing you some of the most commonly used idioms in English. And on top of that, I'll show you all the background history of each idiom, so that way you'll know why that idiom means what it means. And on top of that, I'll show you what are the most common situations a native speaker would actually use these idioms, so that way you'll know how to use them yourself. And just like all my other courses, this course will include funny stories from my life, but it also has funny stories from the news. And that way you'll be able to practice your listening by listening to these different stories. And for each story, we'll have 2 separate videos that'll break down either a commonly used word or a commonly used phrase. And I'll show you the situations that you would use these words or phrases in, so that way you'll know how to use it yourself and you know what kind of situations you would actually want to use these words or phrases. And I'll also have some videos that'll help you practice pronouncing these phrases, so that way you can sound more like a native speaker. Now, my course has some of the most commonly used root words in the English language, but it doesn't have all of them. And you might be wondering, well, what do I do if I run into a root word that isn't in the course? I've already got you covered. I've also designed a 10-day program that will teach you how to find the etymology of a word that you don't know. And I'm going to give you guys the link to the best etymology dictionary that you can find on the internet. And what's great about it is it's free. This will help you practice using tools and methods that are needed to understand the etymology of a word. So that way the next time you run into a word you don't know, you'll know how to understand why a word means what it means, which will make you much more effective when learning new vocabulary. Now, this course will have 2 different purchasing options. One will be just the course, and the other one will be the course with an additional speaking practice attached to it. The purchasing option with the speaking practice will work like this. For a 6-month period after buying the course, you'll be able to record yourself responding to 90 different speaking prompts that'll be included inside of the course. You'll be able to send those recordings to me, and I'll give you feedback on what you said. This will help you build confidence when it comes to speaking English, and it'll help you with pronunciation, and on top of that, it'll help you know what a native speaker would say in a bunch of different situations. OK, 期待在课堂上见到你们哦。